Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This is our first lecture in Principles of Statistics, and mainly Chapter 1 we need to define statistics and some terminologies and definitions. We need to introduce what is the meaning of statistics, and then we can introduce some terminologies and definitions. يبقى دي المحاضرة الأولى في مبادئ الإحصاء. هنحاول نعرف يعني إيه علم الإحصاء ونقدم بعض التعريفات والمصطلحات في هذا العلم. First of all, I have to introduce for you the main reference that we have, our textbook for length. So that the main reference statistical techniques in business and economics that ال 15th edition. الحقيقة دي النسخة بال 15 للكتاب بتاع ليند، مشهور كتاب ليند الحقيقة في الاستاتستكس، وبالتالي أنا عايز أقول إنه هنعتمد عليه بشكل أساسي. ده ال 15th edition، لكن في نسخة أحدث، يعني أوريكم حالا دلوقتي. دي في نسخة أحدث موجودة، ممكن برضو نعتمد عليها، فيها تحديثات وفيها improvement لده 17th edition. لكن mainly whatever that the main reference هنستخدم كتاب blend statistical techniques in business and economics. نرجع كده. From that book actually I have chapter by chapter. I will introduce chapter 1 meaning of statistics, chapter 2 how to organize your data or present your data in tables and graphs, and so on in the same sequence for the topics in that book. طيب نرجع كده للمين chapter now for our introduction. What is the meaning of statistics? يبقى ال first point I need to introduce what is the meaning of statistics and some terminology and definitions. لكن the main goals in that chapter, first you have to understand why we study statistics, explain the difference between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. You have to actually have a difference between a qualitative variable and a quantitative variable. I will define what is the meaning of the variable, and then a difference between a qualitative variable and a quantitative variable. And also we can add for the quantitative variables, we can differentiate between discrete and continuous variable. Okay. The last point, levels of measurement. Somehow I will tell you what is the meaning of that, difference between nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. That is levels of measurement in general. So that's the main objective of our chapter 1. You have to know all these points, and that the main terminology and definitions. ده الجزء النظري الأساسي في علم الإحصاء الحقيقة. طيب ال first point, what is the meaning of statistics? Statistics is very similar to any science. You don't have unique definition. So very simply, you can define statistics as the science of dealing with data, okay? The science of transforming data to be information. But still, we can introduce the technical definition for statistics. So statistics actually dealing with all the tasks from collecting data, organizing data, tabulating and visualizing data. In that case, we say presenting data. So starting from the science, statistics is the science of collecting data and then organizing data and then presenting data. By presenting data, I mean how to present your data in tables and graphs, tabulating and visualizing data. And based on that, all that description actually just describing your data. So that descriptive statistics from collecting that for the how to collect. Once you have a data, then try to organize your data and present your data. And then you can start for the inferential statistics, analyzing your data, including descriptive and actually inferential statistics. But in general, you need to analyze your data to generalize the conclusions that you have. So analyzing your data. So collecting, organizing, presenting, analyzing. And the last point, you have results. Numerical data, I mean in that definition, we mean by numerical data and somehow the results that you have from your analyze. So from analyzing your data, you are getting specific results, the numerical data that you have. You need to actually generalize the conclusions, interpreting your numerical data, which means you need to find out and how to generalize the conclusions and the results that you have. All that to support the decision-making process. You need to assist in making more effective decisions. So that is somehow the technical definition for statistics. Based on that definition, we can discuss how we can collect the data, how we can organize our data, how we can present our data in tables and graphs, how we can analyze our data. So from that definition we have all the content for our course. يبقى علم الإحصاء هو علم لجمع البيانات، تنظيمها، عرضها في شكل جداول ورسوم بيانية، تحليل البيانات، تفسير النتائج، وكل هذا لدعم عملية اتخاذ القرار، للمساعدة في صنع قرارات ذات قرارات الحقيقة تكون more effective decisions. يبقى to have the optimal decisions in the situations that you have more than one choice actually. So that's the main objective of statistics. Okay, so based on that, now we can start to introduce some points or some definitions or some terminologies in statistics. So the first point I have to introduce, so now we are using statistics in many fields like in marketing, accounting, quality control, and so on. But now I have to move to the definitions that I need. So once you have a definition of statistics, from that definition you can differentiate between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So just you are organizing, summarizing, and presenting your data in a specific informative way, we name that descriptive statistics. So you have data, you need to organize your data, you need to summarize your data, calculating specific numerical measures, you're presenting your data in some tables or graphs. Okay, that is still descriptive statistics. يبقى علم الإحصاء ممكن نقسمه إلى نوعين. النوع الأولاني مشهور الحقيقة باسم descriptive statistics، وممكن نقول عليه الإحصاء الوصفي. إنه just بيعمل تنظيم لبياناتك، بيعمل لها تلخيص based on some numerical measures، بتعرضها في شكل جداول ورسومات. ده الحقيقة like that these examples ده بنسميه still descriptive statistics. But you can add for that. We can add for that the inferential statistics. Some inferential statistics means you need to generalize the conclusions that you have from samples to the population. And I will return back to that point, what I mean by the population and what I mean by the sample. Okay, so a decision, estimate, prediction, or generalization about a population based on a sample. So inferential statistics in general, if you have a population that is very large, and then that population, you cannot collect the data from each element in that population. What you can do, very simply, you can select a sample. You can select subset of that population, and then you are collecting the data from that sample. So assuming that these points that you presenting your sample, so that the population, بنسميه المجتمع محل الدراسة. Okay. And assuming that it will be the subset of that population, we name that is sample data. Okay, so that will be our sample. So if you are collecting the data from the sample, then descriptive statistics just describing the data that you have in your sample. But now I need to generalize the conclusions from a sample to the population. How I can do that? Using inferential statistics or using some statistical methods or techniques. These methods we name them inferential statistics. يبقى علم الإحصاء الوصفي توصيف ما لديك من بيانات، سواء كانت بيانات عينة أو بيانات مجتمع. أما الانفرنشال statistics بتحاول إنك تعمم النتائج من العينة إلى المجتمع. يبقى a decision or estimate or prediction or generalization about a population based on a sample. So whatever the conclusions that you are generalizing from sample to the population, that based on the inferential statistics. Okay, so now I give you the difference between population and sample. So population, all the elements under study, very simply, is a collection of all possible individuals, objects, or measurements of interest. So all the elements under study, as we have now, that is population, all the elements under study. Because of the time and the cost, you cannot collect data from each element inside that population. So what you can do, you can select a subset of that population that you will be able to collect data from. So that subset, we name it as sample. So that in statistics mainly, you have all the elements under study in a specific frame, that your population, and then you have subset from that population that you need to collect a data from. So you have some techniques to select that subset, or you name it as a sample. How to select a sample from a population? We have different techniques, we name them as sampling techniques. يبقى المجتمع هو كل الوحدات تحت الدراسة أو محل الدراسة، أما العينة فهو جزء من المجتمع محل الدراسة. هذا الجزء هو الذي يتم جمع البيانات منه بسبب الوقت وبسبب التكلفة. فاحنا يعني mostly in reality في any applications بنحتاج sample out of the population. يبقى you have to know how I can select the sample. You have different techniques for that. ازاي هنسحب العينة اللي هي الجزء من المجتمع ككل؟ في عندي طرق مختلفة في إحصائية بنسميها طرق المعاينة أو أساليب المعاينة. Just you have to know we have different techniques for that. Okay. Later on we can return back for that point. We say sampling techniques like simple random sample, the stratified random sample. We have a systematic random sample. We have the cluster random sample. We have different samples. Mainly there are four: simple random sample, and systematic, stratified, and cluster. These the main four sampling techniques. Later on we can return back for that point, and we can see how I can introduce that in the frame of the of our course. Okay, so once now we define the population and sample, I need to return back for one point actually. In statistics, now we differentiated between population and sample, between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. One point I need to add aside in that slide: a difference between parameter and statistic. Okay, so parameter, I will write that. So the word parameter بالعربي بنقول عليها معلمة. Parameter, that point actually I need it later on. Parameter. And the second one is statistic without S. Okay, statistic. So any measure you are calculating from a population data, we name it as parameter. If you calculate an average or a variance or a mean or a proportion or a specific measure, any measure calculated from a population data, I will name that as parameter. On the other side, any measure you are calculating from sample data, I will name that statistic. Later on, I need you actually to know the difference between parameter and statistics. So assuming now, if you calculate the average of the car's life, assuming you need to calculate the average of the car's life from a population data, that average I will name it as parameter. In the same side, if you calculate the average of the car life from sample data, then we name it as statistics. So in general name, any measure calculated from a population data, we name it as parameter, and any measure you are calculating from sample data, we name that statistic. Later on, I need that. You can relate between these two: P for parameter and population, S for sample and statistic. That can help you actually to remember the difference between these two actually definitions. Okay. So now we finalize that point. Once you have a difference between population, sample, parameter statistic, descriptive statistics, and inferential statistics, return back to the main definition in statistics. What is the meaning of variable? So if you are studying any characteristic in your population, we name that variable. So any characteristic under study that has different values, we name that variable. So now just can give you one point, assuming now we are studying some characteristics for the students. The first characteristic is gender, assuming that I'm studying the gender for each student. So now I have male and female, so that's the first variable. Assuming a second variable, the grade in the first year, okay? So excellent, good, very good, and so on. So you have second variable, grade. I'm actually writing that very, okay, so the grade. Assuming a third variable, a number of friends, as I told you before, number of friends, number of F in short, that means number of friends. Last variable, age. Assuming now each student, we need to study these four characteristics. Any characteristic under study is variable, whatever the values that you have for these four variables. So now the gender is variable, the grade is variable, the number of friends is variable, the age is variable. So now that's the meaning of the variable. يبقى any characteristic under study that has different values, we name that as variable. Based on the values of the variables, we can differentiate between qualitative data and quantitative data. So now الجندر getting non-numeric values. The grade getting non-numeric values. The number of friends is numeric. The age is numeric values. Okay, getting numeric values. So now, the variable, any characteristic under study, we have to differentiate between qualitative and quantitative. The qualitative, that means the characteristic that you are studying with non-numeric values. Or just say non-numeric values for that variable, we name that a qualitative or attribute variable. But it's very famous as a qualitative variable. Second point I need to add, the quantitative, any variable with numeric values actually. As I'm giving you now a quantitative variable like a number of friends, like an age, يبقى any variable that has numeric values, we name that a quantitative variable. Okay, so that in general the classification between qualitative and quantitative variables. We can put that in one slide later on, but now I need to add one point about the quantitative variables. For the quantitative variables, we differentiate between discrete and continuous variables. So now look at the number of friends. Can you get a number of friends in decimals? No, has to be certain values, mostly integer values. يبقى أنواع الفاريبل يعني متغير في نوعين، qualitative و quantitative. qualitative يعني بيأخذ قيم غير رقمية، والquantitative بيأخذ قيم رقمية. For the quantitative data بنفرق برضو ما بين حاجتين discrete و continuous. discrete يعني بيأخذ قيم محددة، mostly قيم صحيحة. I'm saying mostly لأنه in some cases you can get certain values but it's not integer. Okay. لكن in general discrete variable يبقى quantitative with certain values, mostly integer values. Most of the variables describing a number of objects. So a number of students, a number of friends, a number of machines, a number of cars. So all that is discrete. Why? You have certain actually values for that variable. On the other side, a continuous variable, you don't have certain values. You can assume any value within a specified range. Sometimes we say for a discrete is countable and for a continuous uncountable. So just to simplify the idea, roughly speaking, okay, it's not formal speaking. يعني هقول لكم بشكل بسيط كده عشان تفرق ما بين الديسكريت والكونتينوس. الديسكريت غالبا بيبقى ارقام صحيحة، وغالبا عدد اشياء، عدد الطلاب، عدد المواد، عدد السيارات، عدد الماشينز، عدد number of objects، عدد اشياء، غالبا ده الديسكريت. اما الكونتينوس غالبا measurements، مقاييس، زي مثلا العمر، الوزن، الطول، السعر، الدخل. لان القيم دي يبقى الديسكريت بشكل مختصر ده roughly speaking بطريقه بسيطه عشان بس تفرق انه الديسكريت غالبا بيبقى ارقام صحيحه، اما الكونتينوس ممكن يكون ارقام غير صحيحه. مثلا الايج ممكن يقول لي العمر 17 سنه ونصف، ممكن يقول لي الوزن 36 كيلو ونصف and so on. يبقى mostly number of objects it will be discrete variable and the measurements it will be continuous variable. يبقى now we have a qualitative non-numeric values, a quantitative numeric values, and for the quantitative we differentiate between discrete and continuous. Discrete, you have certain values for that variable, and for the discrete and for the continuous you have actually you don't have a specific values, you don't have certain values. Any value within a specific range can be actually given. Okay, so that is enough now for difference between discrete and continuous. So now all the classifications, variables can be qualitative, non-numeric, quantitative, numeric, and for the quantitative we have discrete and continuous. So that the main definitions. The last point left I have to add for you the level of measurements. So in general, based on the values of the variable, you can check what the operations that you can do over the data, over the values that you have. So you have different levels. This is why we say levels of measurement. And somehow means the level that you need to do some operations, some calculations. So very simply, so nominal data like الجندر. Just now I will give you one example. الجندر. So nominal data, just data classified in specific categories or just names. So الجندر, male, female, الcolors, white and red and blue, whatever. So all the in the case that you have a data just classifying groups or categories, that means you have nominal data. For الجندر, male and female, can you do any operations? Can you add? Can you subtract? Can you multiply? No. Can even rank your data or order your data? The answer no. So nominal data, just you have data classified in groups, okay, or categories. Second level, ordinal, the same as a nominal, so that is non-numeric values, okay, and just putting classifying data in groups like الجندر, male and female. Second level, ordinal, the same as a nominal, but now you have one additional property that you can rank or order your data, like grade. Grade is grade, for example, you can have the grade as excellent and good and very good. يبقى النومينال هي بيانات غير رقمية فقط بتصنف البيانات في مجموعات أو في يعني تصنيفات معينة زي الجندر ميل وفيميل، فهنا مش لا يمكن القيام بأي عمليات حسابية. النومينال you cannot do any operations. الأوردينال ده ال other level أو second level، إنه still you have non-numeric data, you cannot do any operations, but you can order your data. You have a specific difference, and that difference can be used to order or rank your data. Okay, but you don't have a numeric difference like الجريد. الجريد بالعربي مثلا التقديرات ممتاز، جيد جدا، وجيد، وهكذا. الفرق بين ممتاز وجيد والفرق بين ممتاز وجيد جدا مثلا معروف انه ممتاز اعلى وبعدين جيد جدا وبعدين جيد وهكذا، لكن مفيش عندك numeric difference. ففي الحالة دي تقدر ترتب only you can order or rank your data. يبقى النومينال والأوردينال non-numeric data but you can order or rank الأوردينال data. عشان كده بنسمي ده النومينال level والسكند one الأوردينال level. الثيرد one interval level very similar to الأوردينال but the difference between level, the difference between the data that you have, a difference between data values can be measured in numeric values, like a temperature. So a temperature is 0 does not have real meaning of 0, but you have a difference between the temperature degrees that you have. يعني the interval level very similar to الأوردينال، يعني الانترفال شبه جدا الأوردينال داتا، لكن الفروقات ما بين القيم لها معنى رقمي زي درجة الحرارة، لكن be careful in that case ان درجة الحرارة الزيرو هنا ليس معناه صفر او زيرو في الرياضيات، خلاص، معناه نقطة اتفاق او بداية للعد او نقطة اتفاق على انه مثلا temperature لو كانت اعلى من الليفل ده اللي هو بنسميه زيرو يبقى positive، ولو اقل منه تبقى negative، لكن الزيرو does not actually does not have the meaning of real zero in mathematics. The last level that the usual that the normal data, that normal numeric data that we have in our life. You can do all the operations. You can add, you can subtract, you can multiply, you can divide, you can do all the mathematical operations. So we name it as a ratio level. يبقى based on the values of the variable or based on the data values, you can classify levels of measurements into 4 levels. يبقى على حسب البيانات اللي عندك وعلى حسب هل هي رقمية أو لا وإيه العمليات الحسابية اللي ممكن نقوم بيها، بنصنف الليفلز اوف ميجرمنتس إلى 4 مستويات. أقل مستوى إنك لا يمكن القيام بأي عمليات حسابية ولا حتى ترتيب القيم زي النومينال ليفل، أي حاجة فيها تصنيفات، just إنك بتصنف putting الداتا values in groups زي النوع، الجندر، زي الناشوناليتي، زي الكالرز، أوكي. لكن الأوردينال هنا في ليفل اعلى، السكند ليفل، ان يو كان اوردر اور رانك يور داتا زي المستوى التعليمي. المستوى التعليمي هي بيانات غير رقميه لكن تقدر ترتب، لكن النومينال قيم غير رقميه لكن ما تقدرش تعمل اي عمليات حسابيه، يعني هي قيم غير رقميه وفي نفس الوقت لا يمكن القيام باي عمليات حسابية. أنا الحقيقة بعيد الجزئية ده أكثر مرة بالعربي عشان خاطر الناس تحاول تفرق. يبقى النومينال قيم غير رقمية ولا يمكن القيام بأي عمليات حسابية. الأوردينال قيم غير رقمية لكن ممكن نرتب، زي المستوى التعليمي، زي تقديرات الطلبة، زي أي داتا بتبقى نون نوميريك لكن في هنا كرايتيريا can help you to order or rank your data. الانترفال still similar to الأوردينال لكن في difference, meaningful difference between values، يعني numeric difference زي درجات الحرارة. any values that has a zero is not real zero we name that interval level. طبعا هنا you have rare examples for that. في أمثلة بسيطة أو قليلة على الانترفال ليفل زي درجات الحرارة، زي المقاس الملابس، خلاص كده، الكلاود سايز، دي حاجات بنسميها انترفال. اما الريشيو ده الارقام او البيانات الرقميه العاديه زي الانكم والسالري والبرايس والويت والهايت، اي بيانات رقميه بتقوم بكل العمليات الحسابيه. ان عندك هنا الديفرنس هاز مينينج والمالتيبليكيشن هاز مينينج، هنا بتبقى هي الريشيو ليفل. اي ارقام، اي بيانات تقريبا في حياتنا رقميه بنستخدمها هي تحت الريشيو ليفل. يبقى ممكن نقسم ده الى اتنين: الاول بيانات غير رقميه يمكن ترتيبها او لا يمكن ترتيبها، وبعدين بيانات بتاخد صوره رقميه. في نوع منهم بياخد الزيرو ليس معناها الصفر الحقيقي، وده بنسميها انترفال ليفل، وده قليل جدا الحقيقه في حياتنا. والارقام الرقميه وده الطبيعي، وده النورمال numeric data values in our life. Okay, so now we finalized the main topics. يبقى we started with a definition of statistics, and then we differentiated between descriptive statistics and inferential statistics, the difference between population and sample, the difference between parameter and statistic. Then we defined a variable, and then we differentiated between a qualitative variable and a quantitative variable, and then we introduced the difference between discrete and continuous variable. And last point, I introduced actually a level of measurements, and that all the what we need in our course as introduction to principles of statistics, and that the chapter 1 that we need in our course. Thank you very much. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.